Let's learn how to use the new XLOOKUP function in Excel. XLOOKUP is a member of the lookup family of Excel functions, so we use it to search for data from one part of a spreadsheet or workbook and display it where we want. Let's see how this function actually works and how you can use it to solve problems. Here's a list of our company's customers. Each customer has their unique data set, their ID number, contact name, email address, company name, job title, and country. On another sheet, we have some recent orders they made on our website, but some important information is missing. That data does exist throughout the workbook, but instead of searching, copying, and pasting, which is time-consuming and increases the chances of human error, we can use XLOOKUP to grab the values instead. We do have unique values on this sheet, and those are the customer ID and the product ID. With the customer ID, we can get the name of the country we'll be shipping each order to, because the country name shows up on the customer's worksheet. And we can get the product description and unit price from the product's worksheet. So let's get started. There are 6 possible arguments within the syntax of the XLOOKUP function, but only the first 3 are required. So for now, let's just focus on those first 3 required pieces. They are the lookup value, the lookup array, and the return array. And what are those? Well, the lookup value, that's the one we're searching for. The lookup array, that's the list where we want to search for that value. This can be anywhere within Excel, even in another workbook, but that workbook has to be open or we'll get a ref error. The third argument is the return array. That's the list where we want the result to come from, and that has to be the same length as the lookup array or we'll get a value error. So let's get those country names on our orders worksheet. We start by typing an equal sign and the function name, XLOOKUP. It's pretty handy that if we type equals XL and tab, Excel completes the XLOOKUP function name and open parenthesis. So first, let's get our lookup value. In this case, we're going to use the customer ID as our lookup value, so we'll go ahead and click on that field, customer ID. We add a comma to move on to the second argument, which is the lookup array. Remember, that's the list where we want to search for these customer IDs. So where do we expect to find them? Well, they're here in the customers table, column A. We select all the values within this dataset by clicking on the first value and dragging all the way to the last value. We add our comma to move on to the third argument, our return array. Remember, this is the list where we want the result to come from. So that's the country list, which is here in column G. We select all the country names from this column. A good practice is to lock our range references in so that when we copy our formula, the references don't get shifted around. So we type $signs before the row numbers to do that. We close parentheses and hit enter. And there we go. It says this first order is going to ship to the United States. Let's see if that's true. We take a look at this customer ID, 398766. And yes, this customer, Stephen Rogers, is located in the United States, so we're happy with the result of this formula. We can copy the remaining rows. Here's a quick tip. If we double-click on the fill handle at the lower right corner of the cell, then it'll copy all the way to the remaining rows. We double-click, and all our country names are now populated. But what if grabbing one piece of data isn't enough? Maybe you need multiple values from a table. Well, XLOOKUP can do that too. Here on the orders worksheet, we have the product ID for what each customer ordered, but we're missing the product description and unit price. Well, over here on this products worksheet, we do have a products table with that data, and they're sitting right next to each other. We can use an XLOOKUP formula to return multiple values as long as we have the same number of adjacent empty cells. We do have 2 empty cells next to each other in columns D and E, so we're ready to begin. Let's start here by typing equals XL tab, and our lookup value is going to be our product ID, so we click on this right here. We add a comma. Our second item, the lookup array, is in the products sheet. We want to search for the product ID here in column B, so we select all the values in this column. Of course, it's a good idea to lock our array references in by making them absolute values. A shortcut to doing this is to just hit F4 on your keyboard, and that makes that range an absolute range. So we add a comma, and now what? Our third item, the return array, will be these two columns. We want Excel to take these two sets of values and return them in our orders worksheet. So we select both columns and click and drag all the way down to the bottom, press F4 and close parentheses. We hit enter, and there we are. It gets populated. They're right next to each other, which is perfect. Our cell arrays were absolute, so now we're ready to copy the remaining rows. Now, if you're using Excel online like I am, the double click for multiple values won't work to the remaining cells. I just double clicked and nothing happened. But if you're using Excel 365, it'll work just fine. So I'm just going to copy this formula by dragging all the way to the last row. And that's how we use XLOOKUP to return multiple values. I just want to point out that if you take a look at the formula in column D and compare it to the formula in column E, they look pretty similar, except that the column E formula is grayed out because it was copied or spilled using the multiple values functionality. We won't be able to edit the formula from column E. This is just a point to note in case you ever see it. So we just learned how to use XLOOKUP with the 3 required arguments. It's pretty easy. Now let's take a look at the 3 optional arguments within the syntax of this function. They're very useful, and they could save you lots of time and effort. The first optional argument is going to be the if not found. We use that when we want to display a message that the value we searched for wasn't found in the lookup array. Let's take a look at what would happen if, for example, this product code here at the bottom was incorrect. If we change this M, let's say to the letter N, then suddenly we've got an error when the lookup occurs. The default is that XLOOKUP will return an NA value, meaning that this value isn't available. One thing that we can do is to display a nicer or clearer message, so we can see exactly why we didn't get the expected result. After our third argument, which is the required argument within the XLOOKUP function, we can type a comma, and our if not found message is going to be something that's easy to understand, like maybe product ID invalid. Whatever we put as our message should be between double quotes. So let's type product ID invalid, double quotes, and enter. Now we don't see any change for this first row because the lookup value was valid. But let's copy this new formula for the whole column, and now we get that product ID invalid message on the bottom row. And of course, if we fix that product ID, we change that N back to the letter M, the product ID information fields populate with the right product description and price. What about the fifth argument? The name of the fifth argument is match mode. By default, XLOOKUP searches for an exact match, meaning that the value that we search for, if XLOOKUP doesn't find it in the lookup array, we'll get an error message as we've just seen. But there are times when we expect that it won't always find the exact value. Here's an example. Let's say that we offer a volume discount on the items we sell. If you buy 5 or more in your order, you'll get a 10% discount. 10 or more and you'll get 25% off. 25 or more, you'll save 50%. We've got our numbers for each discount threshold set up here on this table. We realize that there are only 4 numbers here, but customers can buy any number of items. So if the quantity purchased isn't 1, 5, 10, or 25, maybe they bought 7 items. What kind of discount do we want to offer? It's somewhere between 5 and 10, so do we give them 10% or 25% off? Of course, we'd give 10%, the smaller value. Here's how we tell Excel what to do with those in-between values. Let's type our required arguments by doing equals XL tab. Our lookup value will be the quantity, comma, the lookup array will be right here, the quantity column. We lock our values in by pressing F4, comma. Our return array will be the discount percentage that we want displayed, F4 to make our values absolute. And for now, let's skip the if not found element by just typing another comma. So now we're at the fifth argument, the match mode. We use a -1 to represent a smaller approximate match. Now let's close our parenthesis and hit enter. Well, this says there's a 0% discount, and that looks just about right because this person only ordered one item. But let's copy our formula to the other rows in our data set. We double click, and each row has something filled in. Let's do a quick check to make sure that it's returning the values that we expect. Any orders with less than 5 items should have a 0 discount. And they do. So that's great. And anything with 5 to 9 items should get a 10% discount. And they do. And these large orders should have a 50% discount. And they do. So yes, everything looks great. If we wanted Excel to return the next larger value, instead of typing -1, we'd type 1 in the match mode. That would cause XLOOKUP to match to the closest value that's larger than the lookup value. And sometimes we'd type the number 2 in the match mode to tell XLOOKUP that there are wildcard characters in our lookup value. You can check out GoSkills resources to find out how to use wildcard characters in Excel. Now our order sheet is complete. And if you're curious about that last optional argument within the XLOOKUP formula, it's called search mode. Search mode tells XLOOKUP whether to start searching from the first value on the list or the last value on the list. By default, XLOOKUP does vertical searches from top to bottom and horizontal searches from left to right. But there are times when we do want to search in the reverse order. For example, this list of orders also includes dates. And if you wanted to find out when was the last time each customer placed an order, you'd want to start searching from the bottom instead of the top. So if we had a column on our customer's worksheet that said most recent order, we would use the reverse search mode in XLOOKUP. So let's get started by typing in our required arguments. We start with equals XLOOKUP, open parentheses. Our lookup value, of course, will be our customer ID, comma. The lookup array will be found here on the orders worksheet, and we're looking in the customer ID column. We hit F4 to lock our array range in. We type a comma, and our return array will of course be the date, because that's the column we're interested in getting our results from. We hit F4 to make our range absolute, and we type a comma. Do we want it if not found? Yes, because that would tell us that this customer hasn't ordered from us recently. So in double quotes, let's type no orders this month. And double quotes, comma. Our next argument is the match mode. Do we want an exact match? Yes, we do. So we can either leave this blank or we can type a 0. Let's type a 0 this time so that we get to fill in all the arguments. And for our next argument, the search mode, we'll type -1 to do a reverse search. We close parentheses and hit enter. It says our first customer didn't order with us this month. So let's check the others by double-clicking on the fill handle or dragging all the way to the end. Let's double-click. And our other customers have ordered recently. So let's take an example here. Galaxy Systems. They are customer 821344, and we see that they did order with us multiple times this month, August 12th and August 18th. So the most recent date was August 18th, and that's what we should see on our sheet, and it is. So our formula works great. Remember, you can look for exact matches, approximate matches, partial matches, and even do a reverse search. XLOOKUP is available on Excel 365 and Excel Online. It's a much more powerful and flexible option compared to the older lookup functions in Excel, so be sure to give it a try.
Ready to learn more about Microsoft Excel? Then check out the full course on GoSkills.com. Click the link in the description.